Introduction: the inner conflict. How our actions are shaped by two distinct systems, one spontaneous, the other reflective. Within the recesses of our minds unfolds a captivating narrative, a drama filled with plot twists, moments of tension, and intrigue. The protagonists in this narrative are the impulsive, instinctual, and intuitive System 1, and the contemplative, measured, and analytical System 2. The dynamic interplay between these two characters governs our thought processes, judgments, decision-making, and actions. System 1 represents the portion of our brain that functions intuitively and swiftly, often without our conscious direction. Consider the reflexive reaction you exhibit when suddenly exposed to a loud, unexpected noise. Your immediate shift of attention toward the sound exemplifies System 1 in action. This system is a vestige of our evolutionary heritage, offering inherent advantages in making rapid judgments and taking swift actions, which were crucial for survival. In contrast, System 2 encapsulates the mental faculties typically associated with conscious decision-making, logical reasoning, and individual beliefs. It oversees the deliberate processes of the mind, including self-control, decision-making, and focused concentration. To illustrate, picture yourself searching for a specific woman within a bustling crowd. Your mind engages in a deliberate concentration on the task, recollecting details that would aid in her identification and effectively blocking out potential distractions. In this state of focused attention, other individuals in the crowd barely register in your consciousness. Maintaining this level of concentration would likely lead to spotting her within a few minutes. However, if distractions disrupt your focus, the search becomes far more challenging. As we delve deeper in the upcoming sections, we will uncover how the intricate interplay between these two systems significantly influences our behavior. Introduction: the inner conflict. How our actions are shaped by two distinct systems, one spontaneous, the other reflective. Within the recesses of our minds unfolds a captivating narrative, a drama filled with plot twists, moments of tension, and intrigue. The protagonists in this narrative are the impulsive, instinctual, and intuitive System 1, and the contemplative, measured, and analytical System 2. The dynamic interplay between these two characters governs our thought processes, judgments, decision-making, and actions. System 1 represents the portion of our brain that functions intuitively and swiftly, often without our conscious direction. Consider the reflexive reaction you exhibit when suddenly exposed to a loud, unexpected noise. Your immediate shift of attention toward the sound exemplifies System 1 in action. This system is a vestige of our evolutionary heritage, offering inherent advantages in making rapid judgments and taking swift actions, which were crucial for survival. In contrast, System 2 encapsulates the mental faculties typically associated with conscious decision-making, logical reasoning, and individual beliefs. It oversees the deliberate processes of the mind, including self-control, decision-making, and focused concentration. To illustrate, picture yourself searching for a specific woman within a bustling crowd. Your mind engages in a deliberate concentration on the task, recollecting details that would aid in her identification and effectively blocking out potential distractions. In this state of focused attention, other individuals in the crowd barely register in your consciousness. Maintaining this level of concentration would likely lead to spotting her within a few minutes. However, if distractions disrupt your focus, the search becomes far more challenging. As we delve deeper in the upcoming sections, we will uncover how the intricate interplay between these two systems significantly influences our behavior. The sluggish mind. How inertia can result in errors and impact our cognitive abilities. To gain insight into the functioning of the two systems, consider tackling the well-known bat and ball problem. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat's price exceeds the ball's by $1. How much does the ball cost? Chances are, the initial response that crossed your mind minus 10 cents was a product of the swift and intuitive System 1, and it was incorrect. Take a moment to reevaluate and perform the calculation once more. Have you identified the mistake? The accurate answer is 5 cents. What transpired was that your impulsive System 1 took the lead, furnishing an automatic response grounded in intuition. However, it answered prematurely. Typically, when confronted with a situation it can't readily decipher, System 1 solicits the assistance of System 2 to engage in problem solving. Yet, in the case of the bat and ball riddle, System 1 is deceived. It perceives the problem as less complex than it actually is and erroneously assumes it can handle it autonomously. The bat and ball problem uncovers a fundamental aspect of our cognitive behavior: inherent mental inertia. When our minds are in operation, they tend to expend the least amount of mental effort required for each task, adhering to the principle of least exertion. Since employing System 2 for verification would demand more cognitive energy, our minds avoid such an endeavor when they believe System 1 might suffice. This inclination toward inertia is regrettable, as the engagement of System 2 stands as a crucial facet of our cognitive prowess. Research indicates that engaging in System 2 activities, such as concentration and self-regulation, correlates with higher intelligence scores. The bat and ball problem serves as a prime example. Had our minds employed System 2 for validation, this common error could have been averted. By yielding to mental inertia and circumventing System 2, we inadvertently curtail the potential of our cognitive abilities. Automatic pilot. Why our thoughts and actions aren't always under conscious control. Consider the fragment, so_p. At first glance, it may not trigger any particular word in your mind. However, what if you were initially presented with the word eat? In that case, when you revisit so_p, you would likely complete it as soup. This mental process is known as priming. Priming occurs when exposure to a word, concept, or event leads us to evoke related words and concepts. For instance, had you seen the word shower instead of eat in the previous example, you would probably have filled in the letters as soap. This priming phenomenon not only influences our thought processes but also impacts our actions. Just as the mind responds to specific words and concepts, the body can also be influenced. An illustrative study revealed that participants primed with words associated with elderly people, such as Florida and wrinkle, ended up walking at a slower pace than usual. Remarkably, the act of priming thoughts and actions takes place entirely unconsciously. We engage in it without awareness. Therefore, priming demonstrates that, contrary to some arguments, we don't always have conscious control over our decisions, judgments, and behaviors. Instead, we are constantly being primed by specific social and cultural factors. For instance, research conducted by Kathleen Voss demonstrates that the concept of money primes individualistic behaviors. Individuals who are primed with the idea of money, such as through exposure to money-related images, tend to act more independently and are less inclined to engage with, rely on, or heed the demands of others. One implication of Voss's research is that living in a society saturated with triggers that prime the importance of money could steer our behavior away from altruistic tendencies. Priming, like other societal elements, can influence an individual's thoughts, which in turn affect their choices, judgments, and behavior. These individual influences collectively contribute to the overall culture, significantly shaping the type of society in which we reside. Rapid decisions. How the mind quickly judges, even when insufficient information is available for rational decision-making. Consider a scenario in which you meet a person named Ben at a party, and you find him highly approachable and easy to converse with. Later, someone inquires if you know anyone who might be interested in contributing to a charitable cause. You immediately think of Ben, even though your knowledge about him is limited to his affability. In essence, you appreciated one facet of Ben's character and, as a result, assumed that you would like all other aspects of his personality. Frequently, we form opinions about individuals even when our knowledge of them is limited. Our mind's inclination to oversimplify situations in the absence of sufficient data often leads to errors in judgment. This psychological phenomenon is known as exaggerated emotional coherence or the halo effect. In the case of Ben, your positive feelings about his sociability lead you to metaphorically place a halo over him, despite your limited knowledge. However, this isn't the only way in which our minds employ shortcuts when making judgments. Confirmation bias is another cognitive tendency, where individuals tend to favor information that aligns with their pre-existing beliefs and readily accept any information that is suggested to them. For instance, if you were asked, "Is James friendly?" Research has shown that, when presented with this question in isolation, individuals are highly likely to view James as friendly because the mind naturally confirms the implied notion. Both the halo effect and confirmation bias arise from our mind's inclination to make swift judgments. However, this propensity often results in errors, as we frequently lack adequate data to make precise assessments. To compensate for these gaps in data, our minds rely on false suggestions and oversimplifications, leading us to potentially incorrect conclusions. Much like priming, these cognitive phenomena occur without our conscious awareness and impact our decision-making, judgments, and actions. Heuristics: how the mind utilizes simplifications for rapid decision-making. In various situations, we often encounter the need for swift judgments. To facilitate this, our minds have evolved to employ convenient shortcuts to quickly comprehend our environment. These shortcuts are referred to as heuristics. While these mental processes are generally beneficial, a drawback is that our minds tend to overutilize them. Deploying heuristics in situations where they may not be suitable can lead to errors. To gain a more comprehensive understanding of heuristics and the potential errors they can introduce, let's explore two of their numerous types: the substitution heuristic and the availability heuristic. The substitution heuristic entails responding to an easier question rather than the one actually presented. For example, consider this question: that woman is a candidate for sheriff. How successful will she be in office? Automatically, we substitute the question we are meant to address with a simpler one, such as, does this woman seem like she would be a good sheriff? This heuristic implies that instead of thoroughly researching the candidate's background and policies, we simply contemplate the considerably easier question of whether this woman aligns with our mental image of a good sheriff. Regrettably, if the woman doesn't match our preconceived notion of a sheriff, we might reject her, even if she possesses years of crime-fighting experience, making her the ideal candidate. Next, there is the availability heuristic, where individuals overestimate the likelihood of events they frequently hear about or readily recall. For instance, while strokes result in a significantly higher number of deaths than accidents, a study revealed that 80% of respondents considered accidental deaths to be a more probable fate. This tendency is due to the fact that accidental deaths receive more media coverage and create a more lasting impression on our minds. We remember shocking accidental deaths more vividly than deaths from strokes, which can lead to inappropriate responses to these hazards. No aptitude for numbers: why we encounter challenges in comprehending statistics and commit avoidable errors due to it. How can we make predictions about the likelihood of certain events occurring? A reliable method is to consider the base rate. The base rate represents a foundational statistic upon which other statistics rely. For instance, envision a large taxi company with 20% yellow cabs and 80% red cabs. This indicates that the base rate for yellow taxi cabs is 20% and the base rate for red cabs is 80%. If you're trying to predict the color of a randomly chosen cab, keeping the base rates in mind can lead to reasonably accurate predictions. In predicting events, we should consistently factor in the base rate. Unfortunately, base rate neglect is widespread. One reason for our tendency to overlook the base rate is our focus on what we expect rather than what is statistically most likely. Take the taxi example. If you witness 5 red cabs passing by, you might start to believe that the next one will likely be yellow for a change. However, no matter how many cabs of each color you observe, the probability that the next cab will be red will still be around 80%, a fact we'd realize by considering the base rate. Instead, we often concentrate on our expectations, such as seeing a yellow cab, which can lead us astray. Base rate neglect is a common error related to the broader challenge of working with statistics. Additionally, we grapple with the concept of regression to the mean. This concept acknowledges that all situations tend to revert to their average state, with deviations from the average eventually moving back toward it. For instance, if a soccer striker who typically scores 5 goals per month tallies 10 goals in September, her coach will be thrilled. However, if she proceeds to score approximately 5 goals per month for the rest of the year, her coach might chastise her for not sustaining her hot streak. Unjustly so, as she's merely regressing to the mean. Looking back with imperfection. Why we recollect events from hindsight rather than experience. Our minds do not store memories in a straightforward manner. They employ two distinct memory selves, each of which recollects situations differently. The first is the experiencing self, responsible for capturing our emotions in the present moment. It asks, "How does it feel now?" The second is the remembering self, tasked with documenting the unfolding of an entire event after it has concluded. It inquires, "How was it on the whole?" The experiencing self delivers a more precise account of what transpired because our emotions during an experience are always the most accurate. Nevertheless, the remembering self, which is less precise due to its recollection after the event's conclusion, tends to dominate our memory. Two factors contribute to the dominance of the remembering self. The first is duration neglect, wherein we disregard the total duration of the event in favor of a specific memory from it. The second is the peak-end rule, which places undue emphasis on what transpired at the end of an event. An illustration of the remembering self's dominance can be seen in an experiment involving people's recollection of a painful colonoscopy. Prior to the procedure, participants were divided into two groups. One group endured lengthy, somewhat drawn-out colonoscopies, while the other group underwent significantly shorter procedures in which the level of pain increased toward the end. You might assume that the most dissatisfied individuals would be those subjected to the lengthier process, as they endured pain for a more extended period. This is precisely what they felt at the time. During the procedure, when queried about their pain, their experiencing self provided an accurate response. Those with lengthier procedures felt worse. However, after the experience, when the remembering self took over, those who underwent the shorter procedure with a more painful conclusion reported feeling the worst. This experiment exemplifies the concepts of duration neglect, the peak-end rule, and our flawed memories. Mastering your mind. How shifting mental focus can profoundly impact your thoughts and actions. Our minds operate with varying degrees of energy consumption, depending on the task at hand. When minimal attention is required, and little energy is expended, we find ourselves in a state of cognitive ease. Conversely, when our minds must engage attention and expend greater energy, we enter a state of cognitive strain. These fluctuations in our brain's energy levels wield a profound influence over our behaviors. In a state of cognitive ease, the intuitive system 1 takes the reins of our minds, while the logical and more energy-intensive system 2 recedes. As a result, we become more intuitive, creative, and content, but also more prone to errors. In a state of cognitive strain, heightened awareness propels System 2 into the driver's seat. System 2 is more inclined to scrutinize our judgments, so although our creativity diminishes, we make fewer mistakes. We have the power to consciously adjust our mind's energy usage to prepare for specific tasks. For instance, if we desire a message to be persuasive, we can foster cognitive ease. One approach is exposing ourselves to repetitive information. Repetition or memorability renders information more persuasive because our minds are naturally inclined to respond favorably when repeatedly exposed to the same clear messages, inducing a state of cognitive ease. On the other hand, cognitive strain is advantageous for tasks like solving statistical problems. We can induce this state by exposing ourselves to information presented in a perplexing manner, such as through hard-to-read type. Our minds spring into action, channeling higher energy levels to decipher the problem, thereby reducing the likelihood of quitting prematurely. Assessing risk. How the presentation of probabilities shapes our perceptions. The way information is conveyed to us significantly shapes how we evaluate ideas and approach problems. Minor alterations in the wording or focus of a statement or question can profoundly influence our response. A striking example of this phenomenon pertains to how we perceive risk. One might assume that once the probability of a risk is established, everyone would approach it uniformly. However, this is not the case. Even when dealing with meticulously calculated probabilities, simply changing the manner in which the figure is presented can have a substantial impact on our assessment. For instance, individuals are more likely to view a rare event as probable when it is expressed in terms of relative frequency, as opposed to statistical probability. In the Mr. Jones experiment, two groups of mental health professionals were asked whether it was safe to discharge Mr. Jones from a psychiatric hospital. The first group was informed that patients like Mr. Jones had a 10% probability of committing an act of violence, while the second group was told that, out of every 100 patients similar to Mr. Jones, 10 are estimated to commit an act of violence. Surprisingly, almost twice as many respondents in the second group recommended against his discharge. Another phenomenon that diverts our focus from statistical relevance is known as denominator neglect. This occurs when we disregard straightforward statistics in favor of vivid mental imagery that influences our decision-making. Consider these two statements. This drug protects children from disease X but has a 0.001% chance of permanent disfigurement, versus 1 out of 100,000 children who take this drug will be permanently disfigured. Although the content of both statements is equivalent, the latter conjures up an image of a disfigured child and wields significantly greater influence, making us less inclined to administer the drug. Not machines. The role of emotions in decision-making. How do individuals go about making choices? For a significant period, a prominent and influential faction of economists advocated that our decisions are entirely grounded in rational thinking. They contended that we adhere to utility theory when making choices, suggesting that individuals assess rational facts and opt for the alternative that offers the highest overall benefit, or utility. For example, utility theory would argue the following. If you have a preference for oranges over kiwis, you would also favor a 10% chance of winning an orange over a 10% chance of winning a kiwi. Seems straightforward, doesn't it? The Chicago School of Economics, led by the renowned scholar Milton Friedman, was the most influential proponent of this approach. Using utility theory, the Chicago School contended that individuals in the marketplace are highly rational decision-makers, whom economist Richard Thaler and lawyer Cass Sunstein later coined econs. As econs, each person consistently acts in the same manner, evaluating goods and services based on their rational requirements. Furthermore, econs approach their wealth rationally, focusing solely on the utility it delivers to them. Now, let's introduce a twist. Imagine two individuals, John and Jenny, both possessing $5 million in wealth. According to utility theory, they should be equally content with their financial situation. But what if we complicate matters slightly? Let's assume that their $5 million fortunes result from a day at the casino, and they had vastly different starting points. John began with a mere $1 million and quintupled his money, while Jenny entered with $9 million, which dwindled down to $5 million. Do you still believe that John and Jenny are equally satisfied with their $5 million? Not likely. This clearly demonstrates that there is more to our valuation of things than pure utility. As we'll explore in the following section, because we don't all perceive utility as rationally as utility theory suggests, our decisions can often appear unusual and seemingly irrational. Trusting your instincts. How emotions often trump pure rationality in decision-making. If utility theory isn't the answer, then what is? One alternative is prospect theory, which was formulated by the author, Kahneman himself. Kahneman's prospect theory challenges utility theory by revealing that we don't always make choices in the most rational manner. Consider these two scenarios as an example. In the first scenario, you're given $1,000 and then faced with a decision. Either take a guaranteed $500 or take a 50% chance to win an additional $1,000. In the second scenario, you start with $2,000 and must decide between a certain loss of $500 or take a 50% chance of losing $1,000. If we were purely rational beings, we would make the same choice in both cases. However, that's not how it plays out. In the first scenario, most people opt for the guaranteed $500, while in the second scenario, they tend to take the risk. Prospect theory helps elucidate why this is the case. It underscores at least two reasons behind our not always acting rationally, both of which are tied to our aversion to losses. The fact that we fear losses more than we appreciate gains. Firstly, we tend to evaluate things in relation to reference points. The initial amounts, $1,000 and $2,000 in our scenarios, influence our willingness to take a gamble because they impact how we perceive our current position. In the first scenario, the reference point is $1,000, while in the second, it's $2,000. Consequently, ending up with $1,500 feels like a victory in the first case but a bitter loss in the second. Despite the irrationality of our thinking here, we gauge value not only by the objective current value but also by our starting point. Secondly, we are influenced by the principle of diminishing sensitivity. Our perceived value might not align with the actual worth. For example, dropping from $1,000 to $900 doesn't feel as bad as going from $200 to $100, even though both losses are of equal monetary value. Likewise, in our example, the perceived loss in value when going from $1,500 to $1,000 is greater than the decline from $2,000 to $1,500. Fabricated realities. How the mind constructs comprehensive narratives to grasp the world, leading to excessive confidence and errors. To make sense of the world, our minds employ a natural process known as cognitive coherence. We generate complete mental narratives to comprehend ideas and concepts. For instance, we maintain various mental images of weather, such as a radiant, scorching sun as our mental representation of summer weather. These mental images not only aid our understanding but also serve as the basis for our decision-making. When we confront decisions, we refer to these mental images to form our assumptions and draw conclusions. If we're pondering what to wear in the summer, our decision hinges on our mental image of the season's weather. The predicament arises when we place excessive confidence in these mental images. Even when empirical data and statistics contradict our mental narratives, we tend to let these images steer our choices. For instance, a summer weather forecast might predict relatively cool conditions, but your mental image of summer may prompt you to wear shorts and a t-shirt. This overconfidence can lead to uncomfortable outcomes, such as shivering outside inappropriately dressed. In essence, we tend to be excessively confident in our often flawed mental images. Nevertheless, there are strategies to counter this overconfidence and enhance the precision of our predictions. One approach is to employ reference class forecasting. Instead of making judgments based on your somewhat generic mental images, you use specific historical instances to formulate more accurate forecasts. For instance, you recall a previous instance when you went out on a cold summer day and ponder what you wore then. Moreover, you can establish a long-term risk policy that outlines specific courses of action in both successful and unsuccessful forecasting scenarios. Through preparation and safeguards, you can depend on evidence rather than broad mental images, leading to more precise forecasts. In the context of our weather example, this could entail bringing a sweater along just to be prepared. Final summary: this book conveys a fundamental message. Our thinking processes are driven by two distinct systems in our minds. The first operates automatically and effortlessly, while the second is more deliberate and demands significant attention. Our thoughts and actions are influenced by which system is in charge of our minds at any given moment. Practical advice: repetition is key. Messages become more convincing when exposed to them repeatedly. This is likely due to our evolutionary adaptation favoring repeated exposure to benign stimuli. Avoid being swayed by rare statistical events that receive extensive media coverage. While significant events have historical importance, we tend to overestimate their statistical likelihood due to the vivid media portrayals associated with them. Harness your creativity and intuition by maintaining a positive mood. Improved moods relax the analytical part of your mind, ceding control to the more intuitive, quicker thinking system, thereby enhancing your creativity. Thank you for embarking on this journey of knowledge and inspiration with us. If you found value in our insights and seek more wisdom from the world's most impactful books, consider supporting our channel. Please don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe to one of the finest book summary channels on the web. By doing so, you'll stay tuned for a continuous stream of uplifting, thought-provoking summaries that propel you into action. Let's embark on this quest for growth and enlightenment together. Happy reading, learning, and growing.